what they hide. Oh, tinfoil on tonight. Ancient towers crumble, but secrets remain. Stories of Tartaria lost in the rain. False flags waving, a shadow parade. Digging for answers they want to evade. Picture perfect on the news, but I see the lines. Never take the story straight, I read between signs. Tinfoil hat on, I see through the plot. Hidden signs, clues they thought I forgot. Maps upside down, no ground to the sky. Truth on my mind while the world asks why. Oh, chasing what they hide. Oh, tinfoil on tonight.
Hello, my friends. I try and catch you off guard. I do a spontaneous live stream, 5 minutes notice. Be there or be square. Thank you for joining in, whoever comes to have a little visit. I do appreciate the kind love we've been receiving. I've been a little bit sick for the last few days, so I've been saving you from having to watch my bunged up, snotty face blowing into tissues before I brought you the next video. So I appreciate your patience, and the tardiness is my fault. But I'm feeling a lot better today, and thank you so much for all the love and support you've been receiving on the last few videos. It's going quite nicely, this channel. I appreciate you listening to my transmission. The definition of transmission is sharing a message, so I hope you can appreciate these are messages that need to be shared. And today is a very special day. We've woken up to the news. Well, I say woken up to the news. Some places have, I guess. We have got an arrest today of the first monarch in modern history, which is quite exciting. You may have noticed on my previous channels, I did say there needs to be some accountability, and was getting a little bit upset that there's no repercussions to some of these Epstein files that we were digging through. Some scrupulous people seem to be avoiding any kind of attention from authorities. Well, today seems to be a different day. Maybe there is some light at the end of the tunnel for all of this stuff. So today we've seen the arrest of former Prince Andrew. Was it Andrew Mountbatten, Windsor, has been arrested today by Thames Police, and he is having his properties searched in Norfolk, Berkshire and Sandringham Palace, which is amazing news. Maybe, like I said, there is some light at the end of the tunnels here. So we're witnessing history. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out. I'm not holding too much hope at this stage that there will be anything forthcoming, but at least the people are getting what they wanted, which is some sort of type of accountability for Virginia Giuffre and all the victims that we've mentioned in here in previous episodes. And you've probably seen on some of the other, social media accounts that have been sharing these, files in the last couple of weeks since my channel started. So I'm happy to see it. Let's go for it. Let's see what they can do. So, we've probably got to start off with a bit of a disclaimer. There's lots of allegations in this video, and it isn't the actual reason for the video today. It just happens to be, the top story on the news that I caught before I actually did decide to go live. So as I said, I've been a little bit sick this week, but I feel better today. So we've got a fresh trim, had our ears lowered, and we're going to bring some news to you. So something I wanted to talk about that I know a lot of people, have been questioning and wondering about over the last few years. On the rabbit hole that we do with Sean over there, Rabbit Hole Ramblings. If you haven't seen it, check it out. Give them a subscribe. It's a subject that comes up quite a lot, and it seems to be a bit of a taboo subject for a lot of people still. I can understand why, and we're going to try and cover a couple of reasons maybe why in this particular video. But the subject of today's video is actually the COVID-19 period, the lockdown period, and the vaccination period that a lot of people have been subjected to. We was all subjected to, but a lot of people, some people more than most. So we're going to look at some of the key points here. Some of the things that have become apparent in more recent years. This obviously happened in, early 2020. So I can't believe it's 6 years ago we're talking about something like this. It's seems like a lifetime ago, I guess, for a lot of you as well. But yeah, the lockdown period. We talk about the UK specifically because that's a lot more relevant to probably a lot of the audience. But yeah, we can revisit maybe some of the other countries later on. Obviously, I don't live in the UK anymore, but I'm more familiar with, the situation there than probably anywhere else with friends and family and loved ones and all that, So the UK in particular will be the core of the subject today. But as a lot of you are probably aware, like in March 2020, we was exposed to a virus to grip the world that come from Wuhan in China, allegedly. And we were put into a perpetual cycle of lockdowns, not leaving our homes. We wasn't allowed to go and see our loved ones, our friends. We stopped going to work. Now, in the first weeks of that was great. Like, I'm not going to get it twisted. Like, it was nice. Hi, Scottsbert. I can see the comments. Thank you for your attendance. I do appreciate you tuning in. You're a very free man. You've got a lot of time in your hand, just like myself. I appreciate that. We're talking about the COVID-19 situation here. I mentioned it on the rabbit hole last night that I wanted to bring a video towards the channel this week that would cover some of the key points and maybe steer people into the direction of why this operation happened and, the beneficiaries of it, the benefits of it for the people that have conducted it, and, maybe where we need to find some accountability after Prince Andrew. Once we've got Prince Andrew and Epstein out of the way, maybe we should start sort of lining up these guys. But I do appreciate you sort of popping in. Thank you very much. See you on all the shows. Thanks for coming to Rabbit Hole the other night as well. Great. We did a long show, I think a couple of hours. Me, Teflon, John, Sean. Really good show. Love it, love it, love it. So I'll try and get as much content out about all these conspiracy theories that are not so scrutinized with the algorithm these days. So, hopefully, fingers crossed, they can keep it that way. We can keep going. But, we might see some deletions of channels in the near future. So if this is the last one you see from me, it was a pleasure. But anyway, back to the COVID stuff. In 2020, early March, I think it's March 23rd, 2020, we had the lockdown period that started. Obviously there was a virus that was being passed around, and there was lots of stories in the press about how dangerous it was, the effects of it, what it could do, what it couldn't do. And we was led to believe that there was some sort of killer virus that was spreading the planet and we need to stay in our houses. We need to clap for the NHS. Out in Spain, we have to do the same thing. It's a similar sort of type of thing. Everyone's out on their terraces banging their drums and their tin pans and their frying pans. And, it was, again, the first few weeks are just surreal when you think about it. But 6 years ago it was. It's crazy. The name itself actually is quite interesting as well. I don't know if a lot of you have scrutinized the name COVID-19, but I believe it stands for Certification of Vaccination and 19, which was the year that it sort of come into fruition. Obviously, you mentioned the lockdowns happened in 2020, but this had become apparent in November, December, just prior. So Certificate of Vaccination for 2019. But also another one that did cross my mind is Certificate of Vaccination, but if you use the numbers 19 and turn them into letters through the alphabet, the 1 would represent A and the 9 would represent I. So it could also mean Certificate of Vaccination AI. So we'll get to this a bit later, obviously, in our little chat here. But yeah, the name itself is quite interesting for scrutinizing. It's like I said, it was restrictions everywhere. We was wearing masks, we was wearing gloves, we was having to put gel on our hands and our soap, and everywhere we was going, we was having to be scared of the next person and the air. That's what they instilled in us in a very quick period of time through their subliminal programming, through the news. You couldn't look anywhere without receiving the information. It was everywhere, literally everywhere in the world. Everywhere in the world went through the same programming at the same time, and everyone was kind of caught off guard about it. Now, I don't know about a lot of you, but straight away I saw through it. I don't know if a lot of you did that, and I'm not trying to give myself any extra credit than I need. But before it even started, I was like, okay, free holiday. And all of the restrictions and the policies that were coming to pass, I was not partaking in, no matter what they would have said. It wouldn't have mattered what they said. I was not partaking. I was wearing no masks. I was wearing no sanitizer on my hands. I was doing no tests. I was doing no vaccinations. None of it. It wasn't happening. I told my family previously, like the year before, I said something like this is going to happen. This is what they're planning, and it's all going to be for a vaccination. So it was just quite funny that I sort of foreshadowed it a year ahead of time, and I just saw it come to pass. And it happened to be the year that my son was born. So we had to go through all this crazy stuff in the hospitals, you know, just as this stuff was kicking in, we was doing screening at the hospitals for sort of early stage pregnancy. And we had to go in and, you know, you could just see the fear in everyone's eyes that they'd been programmed, you know, it was surreal, but kind of like funny in a weird way for me, because I kind of knew what it was kind of going on. So anyway, all these crazy restrictions and, you know, trying to manufacture this crazy virus that had got out of a lab from a monkey or whatever it was. And, you know, it got all the way to England and Spain and Europe. And, you know, we're all now getting sick. And, you know, now we have to listen to what the government are telling us to save our lives. So, yeah, I think we've all come to learn that maybe we gave them a little bit more credit than they deserved at that point. But definitely an interesting period in all of our lives that I'm sure, you know, our grandchildren, our children will look back on. And I'm sure they will probably say, you idiots, you know, you stupid Berks, you know, that what they were saying. You know, history will not remember us favorably for this period in history, I don't think. But, you know, the freedom of information now is there. Maybe unlike other kind of situations similar in the past, maybe such as the Spanish flu in the late 1910s, early 1920s. Spanish flu was something similar, I believe. But this has been, you know, replicated a few times, but this one we got the internet, so we get to share the information with the beautiful world, like you guys popping in, and yeah, and all of the crazy information that we now get to share is just brilliant. So you may remember, obviously, at this period in time in the UK, Matt Hancock, he was the Prime Minister of the UK, Matt Hancock, and Chris Whitty was the Chief Advisor, Medical Advisor, whatever term they gave him out of fresh air. You know, Matt Hancock, again, my bullshit radar went straight off. You can see this guy is absolutely corrupted. He actually was a graduate of the World Economic Forum Leaders of the Future program, such as many of the leaders we have in the free world right now. But he happens to be one of the graduates, part of Flying Colours. I also believe he was in finance, probably worked for Goldman Sachs or something. I don't actually know that to be the fact, but it wouldn't shock me if he was a financier for Goldman Sachs or something like this. But this was who was running the show. These were the guys in charge. You know, famously, you know, not too long afterwards, he was kicked out of office for having an affair in his office with his secretary or something, you know, very Bill Clinton-y. But yeah, that was who was calling the shots. And this is who the whole of the UK, the 60 odd million people that relied on saving their lives, was listening to. This guy was not a good guy to trust, I think. And I think we can all agree now, looking back in hindsight, maybe we put judgment in the wrong hands, you know. But yeah, he was there to sign the contracts. So this is the kind of key point I want to get to in this particular episode, is the money side of it. You know, why? It's usually got something to do with money, right? So the UK government signed contracts with multiple manufacturers for the therapeutics and the vaccinations, and for the medicines, the medications, you know, all that kind of stuff. The top 5 they signed with, I believe it was AstraZeneca, which was led out of Oxford University, Pfizer, BioNTech, Moderna, Valneva, I believe, and there's also another one, Novavax, was it? Novavax, yeah. Anyway, there's 5 or 6 of them. There was actually a few more, but these were all given huge contracts by the UK government. The National Audit Office, or the NAO, estimated the contracts were, for the leading 5 actual manufacturers of these particular products, was around 300 million doses for the UK alone, at the cost of the taxpayer for £3 million. So at this particular moment, at the start of the drive to provide a solution to the problem, they committed 300 million dosages to this population of 60 million people. So 5 for every person is what they committed at. That's every person. So they committed 5 doses for every person, paid up front. There's 3 billion quid. Give us our jabs, you know, give us our medicines. Which, again, red flags, you know, red flags. You know, this is a medicine that has not gone through any kind of like real credible trials. It's not gone through any real scrutiny in terms of like testing periods, length of time. Something just popped out the fresh air last year. Yep, let's order 300 million quid for those. Yep, that's brilliant. 3 billion of these. Yep, 300 million of those. Yep, great. Put it in the bag. Take it. So straight away, I'm you know, I kind of saw through it that there seemed to be a lot of money distributed to these particular companies. You know, maybe a lot of you do actually. I'm not sure, but you know, if you look into the kind of the backgrounds of companies such as Pfizer, BioNTech, Moderna in particular, You know, like if you look into actually the origins of these particular companies, which I won't get into much here. I don't want to get, you know, hit with some sort of like cease and desist letter or some sort of type of court, you know, document. But if you look into these particular companies, you know, they do have a lot of wrongs on their list already. Some of them have settled some of the biggest court cases out of court, you know, for injuries than ever. Historically, these companies have settled so many out of court settlements for, you know, injuries of their medicines. It just happens to be these companies are the ones that are producing this particular product for the world. Also, another one was Johnson & Johnson. There was many. There was more. I think there was about 3 or 4 more. I can't remember off the top of my head what they were all called. But anyway, the National Audit Office, they estimated that that's how many they're giving out. 3 billion quid committed straight away off the bat. That's our first contract. Let's get it done. It goes to these 5 companies. Now, the estimated total cost to the taxpayer for procuring, purchasing, manufacturing, logistics in this particular order was actually 12 billion. So 12 billion quid. That's what that really equated to. So making sure that it goes out. Obviously, you have to get it administered. You know, a lot of the doctors were given, you know, commissions, if you like, to make sure that their patients, you know, took one of their dosages. It's quite scandalous, really. I was actually in finance back in the early 2000s, and I had access to quite a lot of wealthy people, lots of financiers, and I was doing some sort of type of advising, and I started to get referrals from people in medicine that wasn't common. You know, doctors wasn't notoriously clients of investment companies. You know, there are a few, don't get me wrong, but generally, you know, doctors keep themselves to themselves. They're too busy. They've not got their eyes on the stock market and stuff like that. You know, doctors weren't really that keen to invest. You know, didn't have the time. And I started getting referrals for doctors. I must have had about 20 referrals for doctors in about 3 months. This is getting strange, you know, like all these doctors are getting referrals. Where are they getting all this money from, you know? It's like the pieces are coming together for me, obviously, quite quickly. And as you go through an investment sort of account opening process, there's a thing called Know Your Client. You know, you go through this process with the client, you speak to them, you ask them a few questions about their risk appetite, you know, their financial foundations, what they want to try and achieve. You know, you basically just get to understand who the guy is or the client is, and, you know, going forward, what sort of products will sort of benefit them, and, you know, more importantly, what they'll buy from you. You know, it's really what that means, you know. Anyway, all these doctors just come into money. They don't know what to do with it. I'm thinking, well, I can figure out something to do with it, but where's it all coming from? And it, you know, as it's going through the Know Your Client process, they're providing, you know, legal documents, bank statements, stuff like this to, you know, get an account open. Some of these doctors have just started getting in these additional payments for like between 6 and 20,000 a month. So I'm looking at documents as I'm providing it to my sort of compliance officers. They're looking through the documents and they're saying to me, yeah, they're making a lot more money than I was making this time last year, you know, aren't they? Like, yeah, well, that's why they want to invest. So let's sign them up, sort of thing, you know. But it became apparent to me that these doctors were actually on a commission. So these doctors were given contracts with some of these pharmaceutical companies that I think I've just covered there in the initial batch of contracts, and they were given the targets to hit every month to meet their commissions. So as this rollout happened, a lot of these doctors were given particular types of schedules to meet, and it wouldn't matter if it was a man, a woman, or a child. They just had to get the doses into arms, and that was their objective. Completely blindsided. Just, yeah, my salary goes up threefold here, 300% increase on my salary. I'll do what I need to do. If that's what they're saying is in the best, it's in the interest, I'm saving the world kind of mentality. So, yeah, there was lots of costs involved, not just the actual purchasing, procurement of the dosages that they actually signed off on, but also all of that process. So there was lots of it going on. The parliamentary answer to the cost per year to the taxpayer was as follows. It was 2.1 billion for the first year, 5.6 billion for 21-22, 2.8 billion for 22-23, and 3.6 billion for 23-24. And this was without the additional logistical costs. So this was what was being passed on to the taxpayer in terms of providing a solution to this problem. Now, as I mentioned, one of the contracts that was issued there for Valneva. Now, that's why I always forget these guys, Valneva, because they never actually got to the point of offering out the vaccinations. They actually failed trials and didn't didn't meet the time required, the scheduling requirement for providing the dosages. So they actually signed an agreement for 380 million in advance payments and settlements, but never actually provided any type of product, which again is quite scandalous. You think, you've been hired to do a job. You're one of the leading medical companies and suppliers in the world. You've been given all this money up front, but you're not able to actually do the job. So rather than saying, fair enough, you've got better options, don't worry about the money, they carried on in court and they ended up getting not only the initial payment, but also a settlement at the end of the court process. So, they'll never on my whiteboard. I'll be looking into the owners of these companies. I'll be looking into, who it is that benefited from receiving 400 million pounds of taxpayer money without providing any type of product. It's just quite scandalous. The government also awarded contracts to other drug companies in the time, manufacturers for other potential treatments. For example, there was a 30 million contract that was offered and signed off for a HIV and the malaria medications. So at this time, it seemed like it was a casino for these pharmaceutical companies in terms of contracts. And this is just in the UK. Bear in mind, UK is one of the smallest countries, with just 60 million people. These contracts would have been huge all over the world. I'm just giving you the numbers for the UK. But yeah, other medications were supplied and acquired. HIV ones, malaria ones, these were old programs that, the medications have been drying out, the purchasing power, and, there's not really a desire for much of this in the market much anymore. It does feel like someone was kind of giving a backhander to, someone associated to these companies, I think. But again, this is just my opinion, so I'm just telling you what I think about it all. But independent tracking data shows that the UK government awarded over another 50 billion of COVID-related contracts across pandemic spending. So up until late 2022, there's been no further figures provided since then. So 50 billion is the total cost to the taxpayer that's been passed on for that 2-year period. But we all know there's probably further, monies that have not been accounted for, further monies that, have not been tallied up. And there's also 4 years of missing data. So that is easily going to be a bigger number than 50 billion. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. There was things such as the PPE, the gloves and the masks, and all these contracts were getting handed out left, right, and centre. The testing that didn't take very long, a few months. The logistical support and the actual, physical dosages of the product. This is all sort of attributed to this sort of final figure. But the PPE was actually signed off on multi-year contracts. So unlike the actual vaccinations dosages that they were providing, the PPE was actually signed off on long contracts. And I actually know somebody who was in this industry prior to COVID. He was in the gloves. So he had the gloves, and he used to go around to tattoo conventions. He used to give out his card to, everybody that needed gloves. And there wasn't very many people. It was a very hard sell at the time. But it just happened to land on his door, all of this stuff at the right time. And he killed it, from what I can understand. He made a lot of money and his company just went through the roof. He was able to go and buy a very expensive house off the back of all this stuff. And, now lives a fantastic life just off of the back of one of these particular contracts of being in the right place at the right time. But lots and lots of money was made, lots and lots of money was squandered, and it was all ours, which is a shame. But many contracts were, forward looking. They were looking sort of maybe into the future. If you want to give them the benefit of the doubt and not say there's some sort of type of scam going on here, we can easily say that there's, potentially, some sort of type of advanced thinking that these people have gone through, and they're now, looking out for everyone's best interest by, thinking of the future and acquiring it before there's none left and all this kind of it. But to me, it's always looked like a scam. It's always felt like a scam. Hello, Ian. Hello, Tom. Hope you're enjoying your day. Today we'll be go down in history. We recorded it as the day that a monarch is actually arrested. It's brilliant, honestly. I'm going to put Sky News on. I don't watch news at all. I don't read newspapers, but I'm actually going to put Sky News on today and see what sort of type of information we get. I'll be compiling a video about Prince Andrew for the weekend for sure. But it's a bit of a touchy subject. This is the sort of subject that gets you put up in court. So we'll wait for a bit more information. But yeah, I did see that today. So welcome. Hope you're all right. Hope you have a good week, Owen. And we're just talking about the COVID stuff here. Now, we're going to sort of move on a little bit from the contracts. And I want to talk about the solutions they were providing. Now, a lot of you are probably familiar with the processes, what was happening. People were going into end of life programs, nursing homes, for example, hospitals. Hospitals were getting filled to the brim, as they tell us. They was building out extra parts to the hospitals on the front of it with, emergency equipment, emergency building structures. They're putting tents up everywhere. Again, all this stuff was being paid for by the taxpayer. Whether or not they used it or not is another thing. But I think they expected a lot more people in these facilities than actually were there. But in particular, I want to talk about some of the medicines that they provided that are not accounted for in the contracts. Now, if you was admitted to one of these, let's say, care homes, end of life facilities, you was actually on the same prescription as pretty much everybody else in these particular facilities. Now, I'm not sure if a lot of you know or familiar with the drugs midazolam and remdesivir. Midazolam is a sedative and remdesivir is an antiviral treatment. Now, in the right dosages and in the right scenarios, they can be beneficial. We're giving them the benefit of the doubt, I'll say that. I don't know for an absolute fact. I'm not a trained doctor. If there's any doctors that end up finding this video and want to comment in the comment section, feel free to enlighten me. But they are marketable products that have been on the market for a period of time. And they started providing these particular drugs with morphine. Now, I was unfortunate enough to have a family member in this particular type of scenario, and you could see them rapidly decline. It was, like I said, a sedative, sedation, and just a switch off of their body in a very short period of time. My family member was gone in weeks, submitted to the hospital, having blackouts after taking a vaccination. Very, very kind of like different person to what we all knew. She couldn't quite figure out what was going wrong with her. She was very fit, very able, and it just seemed like everything got turned off after she had her vaccinations. So she was blacking out, falling over, and they admitted her to one of these end-of-life programs, and it was start to finish, gone in months. So again, this is one of the things that interests me about this subject, because it is actually kind of relative to me, and it is something that I'll always forever think about. But remdesivir itself, the NHS with the European joint contracts, they actually did a joint contract with not just one or two companies in the EU, even though they left the EU, I think by that point. They actually signed a contract with Gilead Sciences. Now, in 2020, that contract was signed for between 2 and 5 billion at the market price of 2,070 euros per course. So if you was admitted to one of these care homes, one of these courses, which would have been numerous different virals over a period of time, it would have cost 2,070 euros to buy from Gilead Sciences. So every single person in the UK that went through that process, the UK government gave them a course that cost 2,070. So put that onto the bill. However many people in these hospitals or in the end-of-life programs, they would have all received that treatment. Like I said, it was a common practice. This is why they weren't letting us go in to see Granny and Granddad. This is why we weren't allowed to go and do last hugs. This is why they was locked away behind closed doors and security forces, because they was basically fast-tracked onto a drug program that, was very beneficial for the bottom dollar. The exact spending alone is not disclosed on remdesivir. So we don't know how much they actually did buy, how much quantity they did buy, but we know they bought a lot. There was a lot. Midazolam was the other one, the sedative. Now, there's no clear UK government contract values. This one is completely blacklisted. This one you can't find anything about. It was an open contract. Just, we'll sign this with you. That's it. Because it's a private company, it was a deal under the table, I think. There's just so little information about it. A freedom of information request in Wales on the usage of midazolam did not disclose any contract pricing, any procurement information, or any dosage clarification, which is scandalous since they're giving it to everybody in these end-of-life facilities. So again, it leaves a lot of questions, doesn't it? If you're giving out this kind of medication, there needs to be some sort of type of additional information that's provided. Similar to the vaccinations, when these actual virals were being issued out to the sites that were administering, inside the actual virals, the care information or the ingredient package or the directions leaflet that you would get in these, typical medical boxes of medicine, they were blank. They'd have the first sheet, it'd be folded into like 18 pages. On the front of it, it would say COVID-19 vaccination dose or whatever. But inside it would say nothing else. So it wouldn't tell you the chemical breakdown. It wouldn't tell you any ingredients. No doctor can actually scrutinize it, think, you know what, this has got something in that's not going to be beneficial to any of my patients. It was just, this is the title of this particular medicine, off you pop. So there seems to be quite a cover up with regards to, you know, not only the information of what's particularly in a lot of these dosages, but also in terms of why they were buying so much of this aftercare product. So midazolam, very, very scandalous. And unlike vaccines or hospital supplies, there is no routine UK government transparency on the exact amounts, procurement, or sedative medicines. Same thing. So we're not allowed to know. We're not allowed to know the ins and outs of why. The end-of-life care medical deal signed by Matt Hancock in October 2020 would have been the first part of all of this agreement with the UK government. So the UK government did sign off on all of this stuff, but they just weren't letting us know. They just put it under a bill, end-of-life care medical deal signed by Matt Hancock. So yeah, like I said, it's a very touchy subject, I know, for a lot of people. A lot of people don't like the thought of being, hoodwinked, if you like, or misled. But there seems to be a lot of questions here that need answering at some point, and there needs to be accountability into all of this stuff. So there was also that particular deal signed by Matt Hancock in October 2020 was for supply of supportive medicines. So very, very blasé statements that were made about, why they was dishing out so much taxpayer money, to all these international companies in a very, very short period of time. So the conspiracy behind it. Let me just have a bit of my coffee and say hello to everybody. Hi, Tom. Hi, Ian. Hi, Futures Bright. Thank you, everybody, for popping in. Not Mario's fan. Thank you so much. I appreciate all of you. The channel's growing lovely. I'm very happy with all the progress. I'm seeing people in the chats. We're getting people popping along. I really do appreciate all of you. Thank you so much. Just be kind in your comments. There is a screener on the comment section because a lot of the subjects that I'm probably going to talk about, do rub a few people up the wrong way. I've filtered a few words out. I put a few filters into the comment section. General racist and swear words, just to keep it relatively clean. If there's anything that, you say that in the comment section is not so nice, hopefully we can just filter out these idiots. But like I said, it does trigger a lot of people. Some of the stuff we're going to talk about, it does upset a few people's real world beliefs. So, I do appreciate all you kind people with all your kind love and support. But if you are one of those aforementioned people who do like to come in and throw a few swear words around, maybe try and code it a little bit differently for it to get through, otherwise it won't be seen. But please, you'd be surprised how much a nice comment and a nice like, goes for the growth of the channel. If you don't like what I'm saying, I'm sorry. Maybe find somewhere else to go and spend your time. But I do appreciate all of you that pop in. I do appreciate all the people that come from the rabbit hole as well. So thank you so much for all of you. Right, the conspiracy behind all this. So we're going to use the word allegedly on this one. It is allegedly a bioweapon. I don't know how many of you concluded this, but it does feel to me like we're looking at a bioweapon, something that's been injected directly into your bloodstream. There was in the early 2010s to 2013, 14, that kind of period there was a company called Deagle.com. I don't know if you lot were familiar with Deagle.com. It was an arms military supplying company based out of the UK. They supplied weapons to the Navy and all sorts of radar equipment, all this stuff. They actually had a population estimator on their website. They actually took it down in 2016 or something. So it was only there for a few years. But if you've been in the conspiracy circles as long as I have, you would have seen this stuff years ago. But Deagle.com, if you've gone to the website now, it still exists, but it doesn't have this information. But Deagle.com, I think you can find a few of this stuff on Twitter. People have screenshotted it and stuff like that. You can still find it. They actually had a forecaster of the population declines of every country in the world. So at that particular moment in 2014, 2013, it was something like this. It doesn't really matter about the date, but it was something like this, about 10 years ago. It forecasted that the UK population would shrink from the approximation of 66 million down to 15 million by 25, 26. So any time now. They're talking about a massive decline by probably over 3/4 of the population. And just to give you another example, in the USA, they estimated Deagle.com that the population would decline from 330 million to 100 million people by the same period. So by 2025, 2026, we should see a massive decline in the populations. So my brain thinks there's some link between the potential bioweapon and this anticipated decline in the population that was forecasted over a decade ago. So this potentially is a big conspiracy that has been well planned out and has been waited to be erected, if you like, and implemented. Now, apologies, my coffee's getting cold. I think there's, I think the dosages include something called graphene oxide. This is like a nanotechnology, and it builds up into your body, and it's triggered by a frequency. This is what I genuinely believe after doing extensive research into this. This is something I feel is probably makes sense, which is why we're seeing a lot of blood clots. We're seeing lots of turbo cancers. We're seeing lots of cases of strokes, heart attacks. There's a good guy called John McLooney, I believe this guy is. His name's John McLooney. It's a crazy name, by the way. Great name, but crazy name. John McLooney. He's a funeral director based out of Milton Keynes, and he has been documenting since 2020. He runs a funeral home, care home, out of Milton Keynes, and he's been documenting what he's been pulling out of people once they've passed away, and he's been documenting like jelly, something blocking up the veins. He's been pulling them out, putting them in virals, putting them on the internet. People have been seeing it. He was actually called to the UK government. I think it was Emergency Response Task Force. He was actually called there as a representative for the work he was doing in relation to the potential harms that are being done. But he's just carried on documenting it. He still does videos every day, every few days. He still takes pictures every time he does a autopsy, and he cleans out a passed away person. He documents this stuff. So it makes sense to me that there's some sort of type of infiltration in our bodies that have potentially come from these bioweapons. He clearly states that these are all vaccine-related injuries. He clearly states that these are all recipients of the vaccines. So again, I would urge you to go and look a bit more into John McLooney and see, some of the evidence he's posted up recently. I'll be compiling a bit of this in the Patreon at some point in the near future as well, because it is one of those things that you need to see to believe. But yeah, very good guy, very honest guy, God-fearing man, and doing Lord's work, in my opinion. His neck will be on the chopping block. And I think one of the reasons he continues to do what he's doing is because potentially he is maybe fearful of any kind of repercussions for raising such questions. So yeah, anyway, very good guy. But I do think the graphene oxide is, in these particular products, and I do feel it's building up in quite a lot of people as a slow burner. If they had everybody drop dead overnight, it would be quite clear what the problem was, wouldn't it? There'd be the people that are left, there'd be fingers pointed, look, this is because of that. But over a period of time, it's very hard to kind of nail it down that this is what the cause of the damage is. So I do feel this was a slow burning project, and this is where the turbo cancers and the strokes, heart attacks, they just take time. We've all been to football games and seen football games where there's a medical emergency in the crowds these days. It's scandalous. I was mentioning up the rabbit hole the other night. There's an Espanol player, one of the local teams here out where I live. He died in pre-season. A young man in his 20s, vaccinated. Unfortunately, it's something quite common. One of my heroes when I was a kid, from Dawson's Creek, James Van Der Beek, 48 years old, not too much older than myself or many of you, I would think. 48 years old, died of some sort of type of bowel cancer, turbo cancer. Again, he was one of the first people to actually go back into work under the new guidelines. I think it was 2021. They let some of the actors start going back into the studios in America. He was one of the first ones to go back to work, and there was a protocol that needed to be followed, and being vaccinated was one of them. So he is self-admitted to have been part of this program, did some work, and again, a few years later, there seems to be a coincidence that a 40-year-old man has, died like that. I don't recall, from the years prior to this, that being such a regular occurrence. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this stuff, but yeah, I don't know how many family members or loved ones or friends that, you've all been exposed to have seen the same kind of situation, but there seems to be a lot of it. Another thing I've noticed a lot as well over the recent years is the defibrillators. You know, people used to have heart attacks years ago, but they were generally older people, you know, not young kids, you know, not young kids. The myocarditis, the pericarditis, these were not things, you know, when we were kids, you know, these were not regular occurrences. Yes, there might have been a few examples, but not in the numbers. You know, where my mum lives, across the road, she had 2 kids who lived in the same house who went through the same procedure, both passed away, and they're like 11 and 14. There seems to be a targeting of males, fertile males. There seems to be more destruction that have happened on the male side to it as opposed to females. Again, that's something I'd like to sort of work out, you know, what the percentages are of the affected off the back of these vaccines. But it does seem like men, you know, have, you know, got the worst end of a lot of it, to be honest. Obviously, a lot of women as well. But just from what I can gather, it seems to be the numbers are very high on the men's side as opposed to the women's side. But there was also talk that it was potentially some saline solution. So if you did have one of these particular vaccinations, then maybe you was lucky enough to receive a batch of saline solutions. Like I said, they needed to make sure that not everybody got sick at the same time. So potentially at some point they, you know, there was like a placebo one that would go out, maybe one of the first ones that people took. But there are, you know, thoughts that some people have taken it that maybe are not feeling any kind of effects. There was potentially a like saline solution, just like a water shot that again did nothing to you. And hopefully, fingers crossed, anybody that does come across this video, that was the exact situation that you experience if you did take one of these things. But I'm familiar with that. Unfortunately, I don't know too many people that I think have been lucky enough to receive that. Most of the people I know that have taken it, I think, have been badly affected. You know, lots of people I know have been sick. You know, lots of people I know have died. Friends' parents have died in their 60s. You know, lots of young, like I said, it's just everywhere. It makes me so sad. Like in my soul, I feel sad. But this is why I wanted to have a channel like this so I could talk about this stuff. I think it's important. You know, you couldn't talk about this 2 years ago. This conversation would get me arrested 2 years ago. But at least now YouTube lets us put our thoughts and opinions out there, and people that resonate with it, they resonate with it. If they don't resonate with it, it's not a problem. I'm just telling you what I've concluded by sort of looking into these subjects a lot, you know, meticulously over the last few years. So I don't know if there's any cures. I'm not sure. This is something, again, that I always try and sort of keep on the lookout for, is any cures if you have been affected. You know, I know that Sean mentioned on the rabbit hole that he hasn't felt the same since he's taken it. You know, I wish I had an answer. You know, I wish I had an answer. You know, I don't know if there is anyone out there that, you know, has looked into the remedies or any type of way of cleansing, you know, the system from, you know, this particular infiltration of chemicals or these graphite oxides or this nanotechnology. I'm sure there is a way, but I'm not familiar with it. You know, my nan used to teach me that lemon, ginger, natural honey solves everything. But, you know, I don't think that's the solution to this one. So, as I said, the name itself, COVID, is, you know, always left sort of a few questions in my mind. COVID, certificate of vaccination identification, COVID-19 in the year 2019. And also, as I said, you know, just to sort of play on us a bit more with their karmatic principles, COV, certificate of vaccination, 1 and 9, AI. In the alphabet, A is 1 and the 9 is the I. So COV AI. Is it some sort of type of technology we've received or people have received that's reactive to AI? I think personally it's reactive to frequency. I think we saw a lot of examples of this back over the last few years, such as like big concerts like Travis Scott, for example. If you're familiar with that, he had a big concert in America and there was a whole bunch of people that had heart attacks. You know, this could be just because of the loud music, high frequencies. You know, maybe it was some sort of type of test that they was doing on reactions. I'm not sure. But I think these graphite oxides in the body, they react to certain frequencies. So, you know, potentially this could be one of the reasons why we have 5G towers, Gwen towers that have gone up everywhere over the same sort of type of period. During the lockdown, there seems to be a lot of people out, you know, putting up, constructing these particular types of antennas. You know, is this linked? You know, I think maybe they are. So anyway, my family have had, you know, like I said, lots and lots of pretty bad experiences over the last few years. And, you know, I'm sure a few of them won't like me talking about this kind of stuff in this particular manner, but I hope that, you know, they do understand that, you know, it's better to talk about this stuff and raise awareness than keep it all to yourself. Sometimes it can be an outlet for your, you know, own mental health and well-being. Yep, protocol. Yep. There's so many doctors that are blacklisted. That's another thing to remember about all of this. You know, if it was any other type of real medical emergency, information would be valuable. You know, on social media, what they were doing, there was actually taking social media accounts down from physicians, from doctors, from people of power and people of influence. That doesn't make sense, you know. Like, if you're trying to get to the answer of something, why would you control that kind of information like that? You know, there's people who've been so outspoken about it over the years. It's, you know, like I said, it leaves a lot of questions. So we prove that there's a lot of money involved. You know, we've kind of led to the fact that maybe there's some sort of type of incentive for depopulation. Another one of my clients I had years and years ago, he was an 80-year-old German. He was, you know, a very wealthy financier. And he was telling me that he puts in between 500 and 750 grand a year into a depopulation fund. And this was 20 years ago. So, you know, there is obviously in these secret circles, there is some sort of type of conspiracy for, you know, getting rid of the useless people like ourselves, or myself. Let's just say myself. But there seems to be a lot of this that's been going around. Was this all planned for a long time? And, you know, have we just witnessed some sort of type of historical event play out in front of us, just like Prince Andrew today? You know, are we living in the end times? But it was quite interesting to see all of that. I quite enjoyed seeing all of that. So this afternoon, I'll be sitting down and seeing what Prince Charles has got to say about his brother. I'll be looking forward to seeing what type of crimes he's being held for and what they've arrested him for. I did notice they said it was misconduct that was, you know, the main reason for arrest. I don't think you arrest people for misconduct of office. But very similar to Peter Mandelson, you know, has he been sharing information with Jeffrey Epstein? Has Prince Andrew been giving away secrets? You know, has he been cooperating, you know, in many ways more than just, you know, in terms of the trafficking stuff that, you know, has obviously become apparent through the Epstein files. So lots of questions, not so many answers, but I do look forward to doing a show at some point over the coming weeks, solely revolved around the royal historic moment that we've just witnessed today. And yeah, I just wanted to bring a video to you today, as I promised I would do on the rabbit hole the other night, about my thoughts on the COVID situation. I would be really, really happy to read any of your comments. I do try and reply to everything. As I said, I have been sick a little bit this week, which is kind of ironic in terms of the subject I was lining up. I did think that was kind of a little bit ironic that I was going to be talking about all this forced sickness, and then I've come down sick for the first time in about 18 months. But I put it down to the kid bringing home some lurgies from school. But I'll be interested to see what a lot of your experiences are. I'm sorry for anybody that does see this that's, you know, experienced something bad in terms of family losses or any self-harm, any kind of experience on themselves directly. I'm just trying to be the bearer of some news and hopefully can maybe make a difference going forward of people not making the same mistakes. If they do release another, you know, virus, you know, how many people are going to line up and roll their sleeves up? I don't think as many. I'm hoping videos like this actually encourage people to do exactly that. But anyway, I just want to say thank you to everybody. We've had great responses over the last few weeks. Really look forward to bringing more shows. I've got some great ideas coming forward. Still working on the lives. We're just grinding away, getting the subscribers up. So please do, you know, give us a like and a subscribe and a share. You know, we're trying to get some sort of interesting stuff sort of planned for the channel. You know, as I said, please bear with me. This is just a transmission. The definition of a transmission is a message. So this is my message to the world. But as we go forward, as we get bigger, as this grows, as the subjects get more interesting, we're definitely going to be looking to do more, you know, integration into watching further videos. You know, I do like all the video stuff, but with the way that AI works these days, you know, you're going to watch 10 videos and 9 out of 10 of them, you're going to say that looks fake or that's AI. You know, it doesn't really bring much to the party, which is why I like to share my stories and why I like to just talk to the camera, and we'll see where it goes. But I do look forward to bringing some lives to the channel with, like I said, some familiar people. You know, I've sent some interesting emails out to some relatively famous people that, you know, I do know. So maybe we'll see some collaborations in the future as well that could be quite interesting. I'd love to share the screen with some more like-minded people as well in the community. I see there's a lot of you that always pop into the shows as well. So, you know, at some point in the future, I'll be looking to invite some of you on, and you can come on and you can tell me what your thoughts are about certain subjects. But we've got subjects as long as our arm in the whiteboard. So let's see how many we can get through before the channel gets closed down. But thank you, YouTube, for keeping us alive for the time being. Happy birthday for the other day. I hope you enjoyed the brief Valentine's video that I popped out the other night as well. I'm working on a couple of little songs that I want to pop out to the world as well. I do like a little jingle. I think it's quite fun, quite light-hearted. Helps me get out some of the short requirements on the channel. They're basically like requirements you've got to meet before you can get to a point of ad revenue, that kind of nonsense, you know. But some of it's like create some short videos, get X amount of subscribers, get X amount of viewing time, get X amount of this, X amount of that. You know, I'm not really sort of ticking it off like a fanatic, but I am conscious that for this to get to a bigger audience, these are kind of requirements that I've got to meet. So just trying to find ways to sort of fill in the gaps and tick it along nicely. But I just want to say thank you to all of you. I want to wish you all a good afternoon, whatever you're doing. We'll be looking out for, I believe, a big football game on Sunday. I was a little bit sick yesterday, so I didn't get a chance to indulge in the result that I believe happened last night in London. We won't mention any teams, but maybe there's going to be something interesting that happens on Sunday that we can partake in and spoil some parties. So let's see if the weekend gives us some blessings. But I wish you all some high vibes. Please enjoy the outro tune, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one.
Tinfoil hat on, I see through the plot. Hidden size clues they thought I forgot. Maps upside down, no ground to the sky. Truth on my mind while the world asks why. Oh, chasing what they hide. Oh, tinfoil on tonight. Ancient towers crumble, but secrets remain. Stories of Tartaria lost in the rain. False flags waving, a shadow parade. Digging for answers they want to evade. Picture perfect on the news, but I see the lines. Never take the story straight, I read between signs. Tinfoil hat on, I see through the plot. Hidden signs, clues they thought I forgot. Maps upside down, no ground to the sky. Truth on my mind while the world asks why. Oh, chasing what they hide.